My parents gave my brother so much attention that they even neglected me on my wedding day. That was my final straw. About 10 months ago, I married my boyfriend of 5 years and finally got my Disney wedding. Well, kinda, because everyone attended except my younger brother, Derek, 25, and my parents. But the worst part? Their absence wasn't even that surprising. For context, Derek was the epitome of a golden child. In fact, scratch that. He was a golden nugget who could do no wrong. Ever. From the moment he could move outside of our mom's womb, he commanded attention everywhere. He won every academic competition in elementary school. In high school, he was student council president, graduated top of his class, and was crowned homecoming king. While athletic and conventionally handsome, he pursued theater in college before focusing on his marketing degree. I still remember the extravagant celebration my parents threw for his first acting role in a regional commercial. They invited literally everyone they know, every friend, every relative, and each person was served with extremely expensive champagne and catered food. The professional headshot they hung above our fireplace is still there today. My mom dusts it every morning, and when, that same year, I earned an honors nursing degree after years of rigorous study, I obviously expected my parents to not care that much. Like, maybe they'd just hug me and move on or say, good job. But instead, they just nodded and returned to planning Derek's next audition. Fast forward a few years, and Derek's 28, a VP at a marketing company, and a corner office and company car. I know all this because my parents never failed to mention it at every family gathering. Meanwhile, I work as a registered nurse at a respectable hospital. I've saved lives and comforted people through their darkest moments. I've had old people thank me for not letting them die alone, but I guess it's not the kind of job my parents brag about. Sometimes I think back to childhood. My dad always pinched the extra fat on my arms and legs, enrolled me into fat camp, and constantly put me on the most extreme diet plans. And as if that wasn't bad enough, he'd always remind me that Derek never struggles with his weight, or you could look as good as you, brother, if you just tried harder. Luckily, by high school, I mastered the art of pretending these comments didn't hurt. But over time, with very expensive therapy, I've accepted these differences. What choice did I have? For years, I tried earning my parents' approval, taking classes they suggested, joining clubs they picked, even briefly attempting theater, a failure Derek never lets me forget. But nothing was ever enough. By my late 20s, I stopped trying to impress them. I focused on building my own life, advancing in my career on my own terms, forming relationships with people who valued me for who I am. Honestly, things got better after that. Knowing my parents were obsessed with appearances, I kept interactions with them superficial to avoid conflict. They didn't seem to notice my emotional distance since they had Derek to fawn over. Or if they did, they didn't care. It was around this time that I met my husband at a hospital fundraiser through a mutual friend. And unlike my family, he actually saw me. He loved my sarcastic humor, my compassion for my patients, and yes, even my body type. He was one of the first people in my life who never suggested I change or compare me to anyone else. He made me feel worthy of love. And after 5 years together, he organized the perfect proposal. A quiet night at home with takeout and our favorite show playing in the background. It was perfect, intimate, and completely true to who we are as a couple. Naturally, I told my parents about my engagement last year. Their reaction should have been my first clue. There was no congratulations, just silence. Then my mom asked if I was really sure about rushing into things and suggested I might want to tone up before the wedding. My dad barely said anything at all, just muttered something about the expense of weddings before changing the subject to Derek's recent vacation to Greece. During our engagement party, my husband noticed their odd behavior that I was too nervous to fully process. They spent most of the evening huddled in a corner over my mom's phone, barely interacting with any of our guests or my future in-laws. Later, my husband told me he overheard them talking to Derek on the phone, who was clearly upset. From what he could make out, they were saying things like, "This wasn't the plan," and "We never expected Louise to get married first." When I asked them about it the next day, they dismissed it as just catching Derek up on family news. There were small red flags throughout the wedding planning process. My mom had already created multiple wedding Pinterest boards for Derek, who wasn't even engaged yet, and showed zero interest in helping me choose a venue or dress. When I found my dress, a simple but elegant A-line gown that made me feel beautiful, my mom just commented that it was practical and appropriate for your figure. I ended up planning most of the wedding with my mother-in-law, who treated me like the daughter she never had. She helped me pick flowers, taste cakes, and even held my hand when I had a stress-induced breakdown 2 weeks before the ceremony. Before sending out both electronic and paper wedding invitations, I carefully reviewed the guest list with my husband to make sure no one was overlooked. I'm certain my parents received theirs. The Evites had read receipts, and I personally addressed their paper invitation. When I realized they hadn't RSVP'd, I called, texted, and emailed them multiple times. My messages were either ignored or met with vague answers about being very busy and needing to check their schedules. Each time I brought up the wedding directly, they would change the subject or suddenly remember an urgent errand. I couldn't waste energy worrying about it with all the wedding preparations. My in-laws were incredibly supportive, helping with everything from seating charts to floral arrangements. Even at the beautiful bridal shower hosted by my husband's sister, nobody mentioned the glaringly obvious absence of my own family. I could see the pity in their eyes, though, and that almost hurt worse than my parents' indifference. The wedding day itself was beautiful, even without my parents there. We had a morning ceremony in a botanical garden followed by a relaxed afternoon reception. Everyone said we looked so happy and in love, but there were moments when their absence felt like physical pain, seeing the empty front row seats, or during the father-daughter dance I couldn't have. My father-in-law graciously stepped in, but as kind as the gesture was, it only highlighted what I was missing. That night in our hotel room, I cried in my husband's arms, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of my parents' rejection. After returning from our honeymoon, I sought answers. When I finally reached them by phone, they claimed they were deeply hurt because they never received a formal invitation. My mom launched into a lengthy tirade about how careless I was, how she had always dreamed of helping plan her children's weddings, and how she couldn't understand why I would exclude them from such an important day. My father chimed in about how they'd been waiting by the mailbox for weeks. I was baffled since I was positive we'd sent both types of invitations. During the call, I checked our records and confirmed that yes, we had sent them. We even had delivery confirmation for the physical invitations. I didn't call them out on their gaslighting attempt. I just apologized for the misunderstanding and hung up, feeling that familiar knot of inadequacy tightening in my stomach. Later, my husband pointed out several incidents that revealed their true intentions, like how they looked shocked rather than happy when we announced our engagement, or how they kept finding excuses not to help with wedding planning. He hadn't mentioned these observations earlier because he didn't want to add to my stress during wedding preparations, but in retrospect, the pattern was clear. The idea that I, the less successful child, was getting married before their precious Derek was simply unbearable for them. Their behavior just confirmed what I'd always suspected but resisted accepting, that I would never measure up to my brother in their eyes. The most heartbreaking part was realizing that even my wedding day, which should have been a celebration of love and new beginnings, became yet another battleground in their endless campaign to maintain their perfect family image with Derek at its center. Recently, I heard from relatives that Derek got engaged to someone he's been dating for about a year. In family group chats that I'm not part of, my parents are openly expressing their excitement about planning an elaborate wedding for him. They're already bragging about booking high-end venues and designer suits, and my mom is taking Derek to private fittings at exclusive shops. All the mother-child bonding time I was never permitted to have. My aunt mentioned they've reserved the most expensive hotel ballroom in the city and are flying in a celebrity chef to cater the reception. Interestingly, a significant number of our extended family are now refusing to attend Derek's engagement party and wedding. Apparently, my parents' actions at my wedding became quite the topic of conversation among the family. Several cousins reached out to me directly, expressing their disgust at how I was treated. When relatives ask me why my parents didn't attend my wedding, I simply tell them what I believe is the truth. They couldn't handle me getting married before their golden child. I present the facts as I see them, without embellishment. A few days ago, my parents contacted me accusing me of deliberately trying to ruin Derek's wedding. According to them, relatives they've spoken to are making excuses to avoid attending any of his wedding events. My cousin, whom Derek complained to, told him people are reluctant to come because they've heard how my parents treated me. My parents claim I'm spreading vicious lies because I'm jealous of Derek's upcoming lavish wedding. They demanded I call everyone and correct the narrative before irreparable damage is done to the family reputation. The thing is, I'm only telling people the truth about what happened. If the truth makes them look bad, maybe they should examine their behavior instead of blaming me for the consequences. I haven't actively discouraged anyone from attending his wedding. I don't need to. People are drawing their own conclusions based on my parents' actions. As things continue to unfold, I'm finding it harder to maintain even the pretense of a relationship with my parents. Their behavior during my wedding finally made it clear that I would never be enough for them, no matter what I did. The hardest part isn't even their absence at my wedding anymore. It's coming to terms with the fact that I never had the loving, supportive parents I always wanted. Right now, I'm focusing on building a life with someone who truly values me for who I am, but I'll update if anything significant changes. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and a lot has happened. After reading your supportive comments, I finally decided to confront my parents face-to-face about their behavior at my wedding and their current accusations that I've ruined my brother's special day. When they started texting me about their tarnished family reputation, I felt it was time to lay everything on the table. During our phone call, my parents immediately started accusing me of being jealous of Derek and orchestrating this whole situation. I did something I'd never done before. Instead of defending myself as I usually would, I agreed with them, but not in the way they expected. You're right, I told them. I am jealous. Not of Derek's career or his achievements or his looks. I'm jealous of the unconditional love and support you've shown him that you never even tried to show me. There was silence on the line. Then my mom started claiming I was exaggerating and that they had always treated us equally. Something snapped inside me at that moment. Years of repressed feelings came pouring out. I told them about every birthday where Derek's latest achievement overshadowed my accomplishments. About how my mom canceled my college graduation dinner when Derek had an audition callback. About how his prom tuxedo cost more than my entire semester's textbooks. I reminded them how they missed my high school honors ceremony because Derek had a cold, yet made it to his soccer practice the very next morning. My dad tried interrupting, accusing me of being dramatic, but I kept going. I talked about what it was like watching them spend years planning my brother's hypothetical wedding, while showing zero interest in my actual one. I told them how painful it was seeing my parents' seats empty, and having my mother-in-law help me with everything from wedding planning to dress shopping. I described the pitying looks from my husband's family, and how I had to lie to my friends about why my own parents weren't there. Their response was telling. Rather than acknowledging any of my points, they flipped it back on me. If you felt this way, why didn't you ever speak up? My mom insisted, as if I hadn't been trying to talk to them for years, as if every attempt hadn't been dismissed as me being too sensitive, or making everything about myself. My dad added that I was being unfair and vindictive by discussing these feelings with our family members. He claimed I was deliberately sabotaging family relationships out of spite. Then my mom said something that finally clarified everything. We never thought you'd go so far as to try to ruin Derek's wedding out of spite, but we always knew you were insecure about his success, she said. This isn't how we raised you. I realized they couldn't even hear me. They believed this entire situation had nothing to do with their behavior or my feelings. It was about Derek's reaction. Even in this conversation about their absence from my wedding, they were more concerned about his upcoming nuptials than the hurt they'd caused me. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to smooth things over. I didn't backtrack or apologize. Instead, I told them exactly what I thought. You're right about one thing. You did raise me. You raised me to believe I would never measure up, that Derek's achievements would always be more important than mine, that maintaining your perfect family image was more important than my feelings. But you also taught me something you didn't intend to, that I deserve better than this. There was a long pause before my dad spoke. His voice was cold and controlled. Maybe it's time we stop pretending we're bad parents since you've decided we are and clearly enjoy watching us suffer. We thought you'd help fix the situation as family, but obviously you've made your choice. My mom delivered the final blow. Hello, maybe you just couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Even though we always try to treat you both fairly, that's not our fault, Louise. You chose to play the victim. I didn't argue. What would be the point? They had just confirmed everything I'd been saying. They couldn't acknowledge their role in any of this, even in this final conversation. I simply said goodbye and hung up. After the call, I felt surprisingly relieved. There were tears, sure, but they weren't the desperate, heartbreaking ones I remember from my younger years. They were liberating tears. For the first time, I had said everything I needed to say without holding back or feeling guilty about my feelings. Later, my husband found me watching the sunset from our balcony. He sat beside me and took my hand without saying anything. They're never going to change, are they? I asked him after a while. No, he said, squeezing my hand. But you have, and that's what matters. He's right. I have changed. The girl who desperately tried to earn her parents' approval is gone. The woman who emerged from that final conversation doesn't need their validation anymore. It hurts to accept that my parents will never be the people I need them to be, but it hurts less than holding on to hope that they'll change. For the first time, I genuinely don't care what happens with my brother's wedding or the family drama. I've said my piece, and they can deal with whatever comes. The strangest part? I feel like a weight I've carried my entire life has finally been lifted. It's not the happy ending I wanted with my parents, but maybe it's the one I needed. The freedom to stop chasing love that should have been unconditional. Update 2. It's been 3 days since my confrontation with my parents, and things have taken an unexpected turn. Derek decided to insert himself into the drama, but his strategy backfired spectacularly. Yesterday morning, my brother sent me a carefully crafted message. Over the years, he's developed this condescending tone, and it was on full display in his text. What you said to Mom and Dad was completely inappropriate. They've supported us through every stage of our lives and given us everything. You can't just accuse them of being bad parents because you're insecure about your life choices. He continued the message with his typical blend of moral superiority and thinly veiled jabs. I understand your wedding wasn't exactly what you dreamed of, but that doesn't mean you should try to ruin mine. There's nothing wrong with wanting a celebration that honors those of us who've worked hard to meet certain standards. Not everything has to be a competition, Louise. I didn't bother responding. After years of enduring his manipulative behavior, I've learned that engaging with him only gives him more ammunition. Instead, I simply blocked his number. Derek has never handled being ignored well, so I assumed that would be the end of it. A few hours later, my husband called me at work, laughing so hard he could barely speak. Apparently, since Derek couldn't reach me directly, he found my husband's personal number, probably through a mutual acquaintance, and sent him a series of texts explaining exactly why our sibling relationship has always been strained. His initial message to my husband started professionally enough. As Louise's brother and someone who cares deeply about our family's well-being, I feel compelled to reach out. But it quickly devolved into his real motives. He informed my husband that as the new man in my life, he had a responsibility to help me behave more appropriately. The messages grew increasingly patronizing. Family dynamics are complex, he told my husband, a senior software engineer with a master's degree, adding that someone with Louise's sensitivity might not understand the bigger picture. He advised my husband to help me see reason before I permanently damaged family relationships. The real kicker, though, was his attempt to play on what he assumed were my husband's social climbing instincts. He actually wrote, "Surely you understand that maintaining good relationships with successful family members like myself could be beneficial for your future? Louise's behavior is only hurting her own prospects and, by extension, yours." My husband, who has always seen right through Derek's facade, found his manipulation attempt hilarious. He particularly enjoyed Derek's assumption that his corporate title or the promise of networking opportunities would somehow impress him. As my husband put it, he really doesn't know me at all, does he? When I got home that night, we went through the messages together. Instead of feeling offended or upset, I was laughing along with my husband. It was liberating to see Derek's manipulative tactics exposed, especially when they were directed at someone completely immune to them. This interaction revealed something important about my brother. Despite all his achievements and success, he's still that insecure teenager who needs to tear others down to feel superior. It's telling that he thought he could control me by manipulating my husband. The most revealing part was how quickly he pivoted to trying to use my husband against me when his direct approach failed. He used to do exactly this in high school. When he couldn't bully me directly, he'd try to turn my friends against me. Different decade, same tactics. With this new perspective, I now see how Derek's actions throughout our childhood went beyond simple sibling rivalry. He actively worked to maintain his status as the favorite child, always telling our parents, and me, how much better he was. Any accomplishment of mine had to be overshadowed. Any friend I made had to be told about my shortcomings. My response to his games is different now. 10 years ago, his messages would have sent me into a spiral of self-doubt. 5 years ago, I would have been angry and hurt. Today, I'm just tired of the drama and find his blatant manipulation attempts amusing. My husband's response was perfect. Rather than getting drawn into Derek's drama, he simply replied, "Thank you for your concern about Louise's well-being. As her husband, I'm focused on supporting her happiness, not managing her behavior. I think it's best if you direct any future concerns to Louise directly. Have a nice day." After not getting the response he wanted, Derek sent one final message. "I see she's poisoned you against the family too. Don't say I didn't try to help when this all blows up in your faces." Ironically, Derek's help has only strengthened my resolve to distance myself from my family's toxic dynamics. His messages to my husband prove nothing has changed. He's still the same manipulative person who needs to control every narrative and sees any deviation from his perfect family script as a threat. Perhaps the most satisfying part of this whole incident is knowing how completely ineffective his persuasion attempts were. Instead of driving a wedge between us, he actually brought my husband and me closer together. We spent the evening laughing about his texts and planning a weekend getaway. I've realized that true family isn't about maintaining facades or controlling narratives. It's about standing together, laughing together, and supporting each other when someone tries to manipulate you, even if that someone is your own brother. I'm more certain than ever that I'm better off keeping a healthy distance from Derek's wedding drama. Instead of getting pulled into my family's endless power struggles, My husband and I have decided to focus on building our own happiness. They say success is the best revenge, but I'm realizing that real success isn't about impressing people. It's about being comfortable with your choices and surrounding yourself with people who encourage rather than hinder your growth. By that measure, I feel more successful than ever. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my brother's failed attempt to manipulate my husband, and things have taken surprising turns. Despite my parents' desperate attempts to salvage their reputation, the situation is spiraling further out of control. Through family connections, I've learned my parents have been on a frantic mission to correct the narrative. They've been calling each relative individually, accusing me of spreading malicious rumors because I'm jealous of Derek's perfect wedding. According to their latest story, I'm just bitter because his wedding will be so much more elegant and beautiful than mine was. They're now claiming I deliberately excluded them from my wedding so I could play the victim. They're saying I sent their invitation to an old email address and outdated physical address, despite the fact they've lived in the same house for 25+ years and have had the same email addresses since email was invented. One cousin told me they even tried to produce a fake email they claimed I sent, but the timestamp was wrong and several details didn't add up. The good news? Their damage control efforts are failing miserably. Our family members aren't buying it. In fact, several relatives have come forward with their own stories about my parents' history of favoritism. One uncle revealed that my mother had pulled similar stunts at family weddings in the past, always making sure Derek was the center of attention. My aunt recalled how at her daughter's baptism, my mother spent the entire reception showing everyone pictures of Derek's school play, instead of focusing on the actual celebration. The most satisfying development is how my extended family has responded to my parents' manipulation. Key family members who were expected to play important roles in the event have withdrawn their support for Derek's wedding. The exclusive venue they secured through family connections may no longer be available to them. Even a family friend's high-end clothing business has suddenly experienced scheduling conflicts that prevent them from providing the custom attire my parents had been bragging about. Things came to a head at a family gathering last weekend. Apparently, when someone innocently asked about my wedding photos, my mother had a meltdown. She launched into a defensive tirade about how I've changed since getting married and am trying to destroy the family out of jealousy. Her outburst backfired, shocking several relatives who weren't aware of the situation and further damaging their carefully maintained reputation. My younger cousin recorded part of the rant on her phone and sent it to me. Watching my mother frantically trying to defend their actions while simultaneously making things worse was both sad and vindicating. The irony is that my parents' desperate attempts to preserve their perfect family facade are exactly what's causing it to crumble. Each time they try to justify their absence from my wedding, they end up revealing more about who they truly are. The more they try to paint me as the villain, the more people see through their deception. Family members who previously stayed neutral are now taking sides. Recently, even my dad's brother, who had always kept quiet to keep the peace, apologized for not speaking up sooner about how they treated me. He and his family have decided not to attend any of Derek's wedding events. He told me he's watched this pattern for years, but never felt it was his place to interfere. Seeing them miss your wedding was the last straw, he admitted. Some things you just can't ignore anymore. I haven't had to directly respond to any of this, and I haven't. The truth is doing all the work for me. Every time Derek and my parents try to spin the narrative, they end up exposing more of their toxic behavior. Their desperation is making them sloppy, and people are noticing. It turns out that all those years of staying silent and enduring their treatment in an attempt to keep the peace was actually just enabling their behavior. My husband put it best. They built a facade of the perfect family over many years, but it was constructed on emotional manipulation and favoritism. It was bound to collapse eventually. He's right. All it took was one person refusing to play along for the whole thing to start unraveling. Personally, I'm doing better than ever. I no longer carry the burden of trying to earn my parents' approval. The stress of managing Derek's emotions is gone. For the first time in my life, I'm not worried about maintaining their perfect family image. I'm sleeping better, my anxiety has decreased, and I'm focusing on the relationships that actually nurture me instead of the ones that drain me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't taking action. It's just letting the truth speak for itself. I'm grateful to Reddit for giving me the courage to stand up for myself. You have no idea how much your guidance and support have meant to me on this journey. Sometimes it takes strangers on the internet to show you what real family support looks like.